Hey guys, Mr. V over here doing a book review today for The Wright Brothers by David McCullough. This book is basically about the Wright brothers who were the first to fly in 1903. And the Wright brothers is a name we often hear, but little is often said about them, as you always hear the Wright brothers and you hear about their first flight, but that's about all people hear. Whereas this book, it gives you the full story. It gives you their journey from start to finish. And it's a lot of fun reading about their journey because, aviation research is a very interesting field, as discussed in the book, and David McCullough goes over that. As we think, in today's terms, we think that it'd be a respected field, but in the late 1800s and early 1900s, when the Wright brothers were really going into it, they were thought of as crazy. Many people who were doing aviation research at the time were thought of as crazy because many thought that flight would never happen. People thought flight was impossible because many throughout history tried and they all had different ideas, but no one was able to do it. So many people were just made fun of for trying. And the reason being because for thousands of years, people were riding horses. And even when the Wright brothers were doing their research, the car was just coming into becoming an everyday thing. So that's why they never thought you'd get to have a flight, and they didn't even know ideas. But there was also a lot of risk for trying flight because while they did have ideas of possibly like flying further, kind of like a kite, if people got sometimes 30 feet in the air and they crash, you'd either have a lot of broken bones or death. And McCullough talks about that in the book because of how many people tried and how many people got into the air a little bit and then they just died. So that's another thing that stopped the research, was any part of research they had kind of just got cut off at that point. And that's what made the Wright brothers very different in that they did not have that happen to them, or did not have any fatal crashes, as they did have some crashes, which he discusses in the book as well. But they just continue to try. And it's amazing that they continue to try because he also goes through the expense of flying because it is very expensive. Because not only, as I mentioned, the crashing, because if you crash, then you have to rebuild everything, and it takes a while to rebuild it, especially in the late 1800s and early 1900s. But how many tries you need to do, because you need to think of different ideas, and they keep changing their ideas and what they're going to do. So it's amazing how much determination he shows the Wright brothers had. And he shows the arguments or the people they collaborated with and the different ideas they had and the back and forth. And that's what made it very interesting, because this took many years and many failures before they had different ideas. And it's very interesting also to see the thought process of how they got their main idea and the reason they got their main idea of how to fly. As there was a very specific aspect that related back to when they first started for something else, and I won't spoil that aspect. But the determination they had also was amazing because they didn't test this in their backyard type of thing. They actually tested it in a completely different area, and they had to take a train there. It was basically, they wanted to test in the middle of a desert, and they would go there they camped there for weeks, and they even made their machine there. They did everything out there. So they just had incredible determination to go there for weeks. And McCullough gave one statistic, which I'll read. In the 4 years that they were going back, they did 5 round trips and 7,000 miles before the first flight. So it shows how much determination they had, just year after year. And they kept trying, failure after failure. So it is very interesting seeing that. But then what's also interesting in the book is, even after they got their first flight, which was amazing, how many complications there were after the first flight in terms of how do you control, which they call just the air machine, like how do you control the machine? There's wind blowing from multiple directions, which we would not think of from the ground, and you get 30 feet in the air and there's wind blowing from multiple directions. So how are you going to control that? How will you land this airplane without crashing it. And, how do you do all this? And kind of you have to train yourself, and what do you do? And he shows that whole journey. And it was also interesting that because many people thought they were crazy, people didn't really pay attention to them. Even in their hometown, people didn't pay attention to them. Even when they said they got flight, people didn't publish papers about them because they didn't believe them. McCullough quotes some of the first people who did get papers published by them, but many people in town just plain didn't believe them. And they also had many competitors who also wanted to be the first to fly, or the first to also, even after they knew the Wright brothers had flew, they wanted to be the first to distribute everything. So they had many competitors, and that's why the Wright brothers were so secretive and had to be so secretive during this. They took pictures for themselves, and he shows that in the book, which is really cool, that there's 3 different sections McCullough publishes in this book, which has the pictures. That's why I highly recommend that you guys get the hard copy version of this, because you can see they have the different pictures in there. So they kept all the pictures for themselves, but they didn't allow other people to take pictures because they didn't want their ideas stolen. And that's why they were so secretive on it. And there was so much pressure for them to fly, as even other governments were asking things because they thought they may be able to use it for some kind of military use. And other governments were asking for it, and they were going to give them military contracts, like France was going to do that. But the Wright brothers had to prove it. And he shows in the book, which is very interesting in this, that they wanted the contract with France, yet they didn't want to give them all the secrets because they didn't want France and this to take the secrets and make their own type of thing. So it was very interesting in that aspect, and how after they did show flight and they did allow people to do it, they showed millions of people within about a 2 or 3 year time frame. They just started showing everybody because by that time they had mastered it. They had mastered how to land, and they even knew how they could teach other people. So it was just a very interesting read because of how much drama happened in between that. And that's what made the book a lot of fun. And as for his writing style, David McCullough, for those who already know him, you already know his writing style. But for those who don't, he's a very well-written book. It's very easy to read, and it's easy to understand. It always helps during biographies to have it easy to understand. He just uses very simple, plain English, never goes too complex, so that's always good. And I also think he had a great chapter length because his was never too long, yet it wasn't too short. So it was easy just to pick up the book, read a chapter, and you felt satisfied. But you could also go on and read a few more chapters if you wanted. And that's why it was never a weird chapter length like some other biographies have. And as I just showed you, he also had many fun pictures in the book. So that's why I would definitely recommend this to people, especially for people who are interested in flight, because this is just a very interesting book. It's just fascinating reading about their story from beginning to end. And it's also at the end of the book, he shows about the amazing progress in aviation, not just for the Wright brothers, because they started in the late 1800s and they continued through the 1910s, but the amazing progress in aviation, which McCullough just briefly touches upon, how one of the Wright brothers lived to see jets, and how even though no Wright brothers were around at this time, their first flight was in 1903, and there was a man on the moon by 1969, and McCullough does touch upon that briefly. So it is just amazing to read about that, and it's just a very fun book to where, again, I recommend it if you're interested in any of those things. The Wright Brothers by David McCullough. But if you have any comments or questions, please post it in the comments section below. Hope you guys click the subscribe button, as I always upload multiple different types of book reviews. But thank you for watching my book review today. This is Mr. V. Go enjoy reading.